You are.
Okay. All right, guys, we'll get started. Welcome. Our Silver Alumni panel series focusing on social work with young children. My name is Jason Olson. I am a MSW student graduating in May. So I wanted to kind of really jump in. I know probably some students have some questions, which we'll get to towards the end of the hour. But I wanted to kind of jump in and have all our panelists who are joining us introduce themselves. If you can, just tell us when you graduated, some of your professional experience, and maybe a topic of special interest. We can start with James.
So my name is James Wells. I graduated in 2011, so about 2.5 years ago or so. And currently I work at a school-based program with middle schoolers called the RAP program, RAPP, which stands for Relationship Abuse Prevention Program. And so I work at a middle school in Brooklyn and do individual and group counseling and therapy, as well as psycho-ed workshops in classrooms around the different types of abuse, amongst other things. I also am a candidate at a psychoanalytic institute, PPSC, which is pretty close to here, on 14th Street. And so I'm interested in working with kids. I'm kind of open to, I work with adults and kids. I enjoy, working with all different types of people and different sort of modalities. And I also, when I was in school here, I was also doing family therapy at a family clinic in Brooklyn, which I continued on for a little bit when I was done with school. And there we got trained in different types of family therapy, so that's something that interests me as well.
All right, I'm Yehudas. I graduated in 2008. I work in a school. I'm a school social worker, guidance counselor. So I have the experience of working on individual and group counseling and some parent stuff. I have grades K through 12, so I have the full range of children through adolescence. So I have the school stuff, which is, the advocacy teachers and the Board of Ed and all of that, but as well, I'm a registered play therapist, and that is one of my passions. So I'm very happy to be talking to you about that. I just recently got my certification, so that is sort of what I do when I'm working in the schools, but being a registered play therapist can take you in many directions. There's different specialties within play therapy, so I am trained in TheraPlay, which is a type of play therapy, as well as the Marquette interaction method, and that's sort of where I am.
Hi, I'm Callie. I graduated from the 16-month MSW program in 2012. I currently work at New Alternatives for Children. It's an agency in Chelsea at 26 and 6. They have a foster care department. They have many different departments. I work in their Bridges to Health program. I work with children who are 21 or under, male and female, who are either medically fragile, developmentally delayed, or have a serious emotional disturbance. I like it because there's a lot of diversity in my cases, and I deal with parents, foster parents, grandparents, and then I like what I do because I also get to speak with professionals that like doctors, teachers, and anyone else that works with the children I work with. And yeah, that's fine.
Hi, I'm Amy Morin. I graduated in '95. When I graduated, I actually worked in residential treatment in Westchester, New York, with school-age boys. So I was there for a couple of years, and I worked in foster care as well for the same agency. And then I took about 10 years off. I had 3 children. And I came back to the world of social work about 5 years ago, and I currently work at TheraPlay on the Upper East Side, which is a sensory gym for preschoolers. So the kids come, they have some sort of sensory disorder, and they come for physical therapy, occupational therapy, speech therapy, and I do the counseling there. So I do a lot of play therapy because the kids are 3, 4, and 5 years old, most of them. And I'm interested in further training in play therapy. I have taken some classes, and that's where I see myself going in the future.
Thank you. So I thought we'd start with getting panelist ideas in terms of the most surprising aspects of your work with young children, both positive and negative. Callie, we can start with you.
Sure. I guess going out into like the professional world after graduation, I was really apprehensive about home visits. I was really thinking that was something I did not want to do and that I would not enjoy. And as it turns out, I really like them. I will say that I don't do them very often. I have to do them for my children. I have 6 cases and I have to do for each of them once a month, so I'm out in the field 6 times in the month. It's a really nice break. You can, I mean, anyone would know like staying in school 9 to 5 is difficult, so getting up and like leaving your desk sometimes and leaving at 3 and having a visit at 4 and then being done at 5, it's kind of like a nice breakup. And I also think that it gives you a lot more insight about a child and their like home environment. And I know that a bunch of you are taking like human behavior in the social environment, and that's kind of like, you know, getting a little glimpse into their like social living and stuff. So that's what I like about it.
James.
Oh, me. I would say that the most surprising thing about working with youth is the impact you can make in what seems like a short period of time to me. Just in you know, I've noticed over, I guess, the last 2 years of you know, the kids that I've worked with throughout that time, you could really tell a big difference in that time, which was surprising to me. You know, I guess I worked with adults when I was in school, and it seemed like that was a slower process. And I would say, as on the negative side, working in schools, how much the system plays into the work that you do, and having to work with teachers and guidance counselors, and there's so many people that can try to interfere with the work or can be involved, and so a lot of the work has to do with managing that. That can be a difficult thing depending on which school you're at, and so forth.
So I'm what James said. Yes, when you're in the school, there's, you know, kids don't live in a vacuum. You've got their parents, you've got the teachers, you've got the systems, and lots of kids are involved in lots of systems. So that can be difficult, but in a sense it's also hopeful, because somewhere along the way they may bump into what we'll call a charismatic adult, somebody who will be that person for them, so that, you know, there's the positive and the negative, they're in so many systems. But one of the things that was really surprising was, you know, I'll say, you know, when you're a child therapist, you wear washable clothes, which means it's very different than the adult therapy world. You're not the one sitting there and, you know, in your suit, and, you know, the child looking at you and, wow, that was really an insight. It's very different. You know, you're in glitter, you're in paint, you're in crayons, you're moving, you know, it's just a very different dynamic, which was surprising to me, but at the same time, which is what I love about what I do.
Okay, so you're right, I'm on the floor all the time.
That's where I am.
Somebody
yeah.
asked me if they put a camera in the room where I was doing my psychotherapy, what they would see. I would say, you'd see me sitting on the floor
Yeah.
with the kids. But the most surprising thing that I found in working with preschoolers is that they are not guarded. So once they trust the environment and they trust the room that you're in, everything comes out. So I don't know where your field placements have been, but in working in different environments, you all know that to engage the client can be very difficult, and there are some clients that are so guarded, and the preschoolers just aren't. And that's what I was surprised about, was how we'll really be sitting on the floor and playing with anything from Legos to cars to this, and they'll say, did you know that this monster under my bed, and very specific fears, and you can really help them to work out those fears. And so I was surprised at how unguarded they were once they're comfortable, and I think that that's what I like about it, is you feel like you can really assist them in talking out and working out their fears.
Thank you. So we're talking about some of the positive and negative. In terms of the challenges that you faced early on in your career, how do you work through them or overcome them?
Well, I think a challenge that I encountered early on was feeling isolated in the work, and because working with kids, so much of the what's being communicated is non-verbal. It's communicated through play, or they don't. A lot of the children that I work with don't have the language yet to tell you how they feel, so they have to act it out or whatever. It ends up being that in the beginning, especially, I was taking a lot home with me, and so also I remember my agency's supervision was not the best, and I mean it's fine, but it was more based on problem solving and sort of dealing with concrete issues that would come up. So it wasn't until I sort of figured out ways of getting myself into other communities that I was able to feel less isolated and was able to not take as much home with me.
Yes, okay, so the thing that I struggled with in working with very young children was how much to actually observe the play versus be in the play. Because you didn't want to be too much in it, because you want them to create what they're feeling and what they're going through, but you don't want to just sit and watch for the whole 45 minutes what they're playing. So I think that was the challenge for me, was really kind of figuring out how much, how many, if they're doing a puppet show, how much interaction do I want to do with the puppets? Or if they're just playing with figures, I want to be a figure too, and I want to be a figure that's kind of asking questions, but not too many, because I want it to come from them. So at first I just did a lot of observation when I started working with the very young population, and then I eased into how much I could also be involved in the actual play.
Callie?
I guess the challenges I faced at the beginning were similarly to James. I think it's really important to find ways to separate whatever happens personally and professionally. I didn't experience this challenge, but a lot of people who were in similar positions, like right after graduation, when they would get a position where they could make their own schedule, there's a lot of flexibility there. But some people embrace that, and then some people find it very difficult. And I don't know, I'm Canadian, so getting my visa and being able to work in this country was a challenge for me as well.
Alright, so there were a couple things. Professionally, I knew when I graduated I wanted to move on towards getting my registered play therapy credential. The problem is that on the East Coast, there isn't a whole lot of play therapy. If you were anywhere from Texas westward, on every corner store you'll find something there. But here, there's very little. So the first thing was just finding the training that I needed, finding the supervision that I needed. It was difficult. More of it is coming now, but if anyone is interested, I can give you the resources that I know afterwards. So that was just, I did a lot of traveling. I went to get the training that I needed. I did some audio. There's online stuff coming on now so that you can watch the trainings and take a test afterwards and get the credit for it that way. I did a lot of reading on my own. and I found my own supervisions, Skyping supervision, things like that. So that was just in the actual RPT stuff, that was my challenge. As everybody else said, when things happen to little kids, it just hurts you more. It's really difficult to do that separation. But it was one of my little kids who said something that really was, it helped me. She said, I've been living with this my whole life. It's not that big of a deal. You know, when we hear it, we're like, oh my God. But she was like, you know, it's okay. And that sort of helped me realize, you know, you don't have to take it home with you. They'll manage fine. Kids are a lot more resilient than we give them credit for. So that sort of helped me with that. I think that's about it.
So a couple of panelists had mentioned kind of issues or some challenges around supervision. How did you, in terms of starting your job search, identify what the right organization or agency was for you? What factors did you look at in terms of making sure that it was the right fit?
Well, when I graduated, I was hired on my placement, and I was initially working under one supervisor, and then they transferred me to another supervisor, and long story short, it wasn't a great match for me. And so I started looking for jobs, and a good resource was I kept in touch with a lot of people I knew from NYU, and there's a number of, I remember sort of Facebook threads that were going on, people would post jobs in there, or various things. I think my practice class had one, and then there was another group, and so I heard about the job that I'm in now from somebody that I graduated with, and that was a good thing because I was able to, you know, ask her questions, and she sort of helped me prep for the interview, and then I was able to ask her, you know, what the job was like, and that was very helpful. So it gave me a real sense of what it was going to be like, and it's worked out.
So I was lucky, I was hired on after my second placement. But before I actually took the job, what I made sure was that they understood what play therapy is, because a lot of people don't, and they feel it's, you know, you'll play a game with the child so that they will trust you, so that you can talk about their issues, which is not the case. So I needed to make sure, I think many of you are looking to do the kind of work that I do, you want to be sure that the agency understands that, you know, they'll tell you, she's fighting, she's bullying other kids at recess, talk to her about it. And you'll say, but then you won't go and say, oh, and I heard that you're bullying kids, and why do you do that, and how do you feel about that? Because that's not going to work. So you say, put that in the back of your mind, and then you do what you're doing with the child in their language, and you know, you're taking care of what the school wanted, but you have to make sure that they kind of give you that space, and they understand what you see as the work that you are going to do, and that they have to be on board with that. Whatever your philosophy is and how you work with young children.
I think for me, when it comes to supervision, I asked a lot of questions during my interview process because I wanted to make sure I'd be receiving really thorough supervision for whatever job that I attained, and I have that now, so I'm very fortunate. We have every Wednesdays at 1:30, and it usually goes until 3 or 3:30, and it's not very formal, but it's very good for my continuing education and development. I'm supervised by someone who has their LCSW. I did make sure to ask in the interview that this would be possible because I knew personally I wouldn't want to pay out of pocket to do that and get my hours to work towards my LCSW. But I will say, I guess a challenge that I see with supervision a lot is has to do with age. Because when you graduate and you're a fresh face right out of graduation and you're so eager beaver to get into the working world, I think if someone is a different age than you, it can create some sort of hierarchy that you don't intend to have there. And also, like, if you're very close in age with the person supervising you, then there creates a really tough balance between we're on a friendly level and we're being on a professional level. And sometimes those lines get blurred. And I know at my agency, some people who have very young supervisors, they don't know when someone's gonna have their friendly face on and then their professional face on. And it's hard to manage sometimes, but it can be navigated.
Okay, so when I decided to take the job at Therapy, I guess just practically what was important to me was flexibility. Then I needed to find an agency or a place to work that would allow me to work part-time and be home for my kids when they're coming home from school. So that was important to me. In terms of the supervision, yes, I wanted to make sure that there was another social worker there because I've been out of work for 10 years. So I put myself back in the workforce. I wanted to make sure that I was going to have somebody there who was going to be able to, you don't have to call it supervise, but at least, clinically speak the language with me. And it's tough because once you have your LCSW, and I had it already, I had my LCSW when I was going back to work. You don't need to be supervised. You're on your own. That's it. So one of the things that Therapy where I work at the time was owned by an occupational therapist and a social worker. So I was very clear that I know I don't need supervision, but I need somebody who's going to be a sounding board for me. And before I took the job, we did agree that we would have either a face-to-face or a phone conversation at least once a week. So that's how I manage the supervision piece. And she's not there anymore, the social worker, now it's owned by a physical therapist. And so I have to, talk to other social workers just that I know what feels about clinical issues.
So many of the students here either are interested in work with young children or are pretty set in terms of their career trajectory. What experiences or kind of courses or even outside licensing type of dynamics, what would you recommend in terms of for students to kind of further pinpoint their career trajectory? Amy?
Okay, so where I work, you actually need your LCSW because they do not provide the supervision that you need to then become an LCSW. So I don't know if it's like that at all sensory-based gyms in the city, but that's where I work. So that's one thing, is that you need to get some sort of job to begin with that provides you with those hours of supervision so you can be on the track to get your LCSW. It is very important to eventually get that. The other thing that I did right when I graduated is I did the advanced certificate then it was in clinical, I know now it's changed, but right here at NYU. So I felt like I still wanted to keep my feet wet in terms of the education. So I would go to my job in Westchester and then I would take the train down here once a week, and I did the advanced clinical certificates about a year and a half. And also, like I said, I do take ongoing classes in play therapy with the hopes of one day getting the play therapy certification as well.
Well, you guys are already on the right track. You're getting your MSW, so that's great. I think that the LMSW is really scary when you're in grad school, but then as soon as you're done, and if you just study for a little bit, it's not as scary as you think it will be. And I think that your job opportunities are a lot more expansive if you take it. So that would be my recommendation. I found that before I was taking it, it was struggling because I don't sit still very well, but I couldn't really be applying to positions because they all wanted me to take my LM. And I was like, well, just wait, like it'll be on my resume shortly. But once I had it, I thought that there was a lot more places I could apply. And after that, I don't think I found that any continuing education or licensing has been necessary for my work right now. But I think the more you can do in your own time, the better, honestly. That's all.
So the first thing that I would say is there's the Association for Play Therapy International. International, get involved with them. If you become, they have student membership. When you become a member, you get, they get weekly, like, I forget what they call it, mining reports or something, just like things that are going on in the field. They send you an email once a week. There's 8 journals that they send out of different, pieces that people write just to keep you, the field is growing, the field is not very large, and so just to keep on par with what's going on. So that would be my first recommendation, get involved with the Association for Play Therapy. The second one is I took the postmaster certificate in child and family therapy here at NYU. I waited a little bit after graduating because I felt like I knew so much in my head and I didn't have a whole lot of experience. So doing the postmaster certificate right after I graduated felt like I'd just be doing more of the same. So I waited about a year or so until I had some experience to bring with me into the classroom. So then it made more sense about what I was learning. It wasn't just knowledge-based now, it was something that, oh yeah, that makes sense. So that was the second thing. And then, eventually working towards your RPT. So the RPT requires 150 hours of approved education. So there are different places that are Association for Play Therapy approved. So you need 150 hours. There's different, some of them have to be in developmental areas, and some of them have to be in theory, and some have to be in application. There's, it's all listed on the website. And then you need 2,000 clinical hours, and 500 play therapy hours, and 50 play therapy supervised hours. There's a credential RPTS, which is a registered play therapy supervisor. So you need 50 hours with such an individual. All that together gives you your RPT. It's a lot of work, but if this is something that you want to do, I think it gives you the tools that you need in order to be an effective play therapist. One of the important things, the reason that I find I need continuing education all the time is because with kids, most of them are not coming with a diagnosis. Most of them are coming, and you remember, kids are still developing. So, when you see something, you don't know, is this just they're lagging behind a little bit? Is this normal? Is this something, a soft sign of something that's to come, and we need to watch it? And so you need to have a lot of interventions that you can do based on the developmental level that the child is in, because they keep changing as they age, as they go from 0 to 20 or 18, whatever your age group is. So I think you need a lot of continuing education, but I think the job is just so wonderful, so it's worth it.
Good.
So I remember when I first started my job search, I was making sure that it was, like Callie was saying, allowing me to work towards my LCSW, so that was a very important thing. And shortly after I started there, I found a supervision group, which I started going to, which I'm still part of, and that was very helpful. It was other people in the field that are, farther along than me, and the focus was on kids and was largely on kids. And then a year later, I decided to do institute training, and that's been really helpful as well, just in terms of there's many people there that also work with kids, and it gives me great supervision, and I oftentimes will talk about the kids that I work with in supervision there. So that's been another great thing that has helped me feel more supported in the work that I do.
I do want to open it up to audience questions, so if you have a question for the panelists.
I know a few of you said you were hired at your second placements, which is obviously very beneficial. For those of you who weren't, did your placements at NYU give you experience with children, or did you sort of go into the field blindly? And if so, did you find that it was more difficult to be hired without experience? Speak to that a little bit.
My second placement was here at NYU. I worked in program development. So I was doing less interpersonal interactions and more coordinating, different events and things like that. So I had worked with children and families in the past, but it had been a little while back, and I just found that getting more experience, and I found that I didn't have to have any. It wasn't necessarily a professional experience. I had babysat with children. I had, that got me my first job out of graduation, which was working with kids who had sensory processing disorders. I met people who, NYU really enforces and drives home networking, and I'd like to reiterate that to all of you, because there's this whole glamour about getting a position from your second placement, and I think that's great if you can do it and if you love it, but you might be in a second year placement that you don't think is amazing. It was a great experience, and now you're ready to move on to bigger and better things. I don't want you to be scared or intimidated by that. I think you can find a job on your own. Just network with the right people, speak to different people. When you graduate, people in your class are looking for jobs too. Oh, there's an opening here and they need 3 new hires. Great, I'm gonna apply too. There's different things that you can do, and I wouldn't be intimidated. However, if you really love where you work, then just try it, go for it, and I'm all about that too.
Amy, what's been your experience?
Okay, so I had 2 placements with young children. I grew up in New Jersey. I was living home at the time, so it was just luck of the draw, because I had my closest friends here who also wanted to work with young children who were placed in elderly facilities. So I just got lucky that way. I had 2 placements. One was in residential treatment in New Jersey, actually, and one was in an outpatient clinic, and they both were working with young children. So I guess that helped, yes, when I wanted to go out into the field to do it. But I actually think that what Callie said, the first thing that she said is such a good point, which is that, okay, so if your field placement wasn't exactly what you wanted to be, there are other ways to get your hands on working with children. It doesn't have to be, my field placement was X. People volunteer in camps all the time. There's so many. Actually, when I was in social work school, I worked at a camp for kids with cancer. There's so many different ways to do things in the summer, and I'm volunteering. I know you guys are in school, and so you're volunteering. How do I volunteer with a placement and with classes and all of that? But taking their time in the summer or whatever, but there are other ways too. I think that's a great point, to do things with young children, even if it's not your placement.
Can I add one more thing to that really quickly, is that there's a lot of skills in social work that are transferable, working with people with substance abuse or elderly population, compassion is compassion, and I think that if you can highlight a lot of those things, and if you come into an interview saying, well, yeah, I worked with a different population, but they're people too, and then explain what kind of skills you can use that are transferable, then I think that that's really important, and you can use that as a strength and not a weakness.
One of the things that I keep hearing from people who are working with adults is how important it is to get some training in CBT. I was wondering, is that something you find you use with children, or would recommend pursuing extra postgraduate studies in?
So just like there are various, training, you can be a diehard CBT or a psychoanalyst, or there's all different kinds of things working with adults. There's all different kinds of, theories in working with kids. Is there CBT amongst children? Absolutely. Is it something that I personally like? No. But that doesn't mean that it's not valid, I find that, here we're saying that kids don't speak a language of words, and then we're going and making them do all these cognitive processes. I personally don't like it for most of my kids. Of course it exists, but you're gonna, doing a regular CBT training program, you have to make sure that it has a child component, because I don't know about you, but when I was at NYU, I had very little training in working with children. And so most of what you do is kind of fun. And what you get here is a good basis for, working with human beings in general. But working with children specifically, you're going to want to make sure your CBT program has that component, because it's different than working with adults. Yes, insurance loves it, that for sure.
Yeah, that's not something that I've been trained in, but so many of the things that I do are, CBT-ish, working with people's thought processes and looking at that. But I think really the most important thing is just being authentic. And if that's something that really speaks to you, then that can certainly work with kids, I think. But we all have different interests, and I think that whoever we work with responds to authenticity. So that's what I'd say. And back to the earlier question, I would say, from my experience, I remember, I know a lot of the people that I graduated with went through, 2 or 3 jobs before landing on one that they stayed in for a while. So, a lot of the placements that can turn into jobs, it can be different. A placement could be a good placement, but then the actual job itself is different, and so that happens. So I would second the idea of using classmates as a resource, because I found that to be really helpful.
Any questions from this side? You're the only one. Can you just tell us a little bit about your initial job search once you graduated? What did that look like?
My job search, once I graduated, I was hired at my second position. So I didn't have a lot of a job search. But as you were saying, it is very different. The glamour of being hired on has its other unglamorous side too, and that, when you're the intern, they'll give you the intern cases, and then all of a sudden, because whatever the date was hit, now all of a sudden you're being hit with who knows what, and you're like, oh my God, I don't know how to do this. I'm no different than I was yesterday. And so that can be a little tricky. Or the opposite of, you're the intern, go and do whatever. Well, I'm not the intern anymore, and when am I going to, graduate from that intern place? So there's pluses and minuses.
You said you didn't have much experience with children when you were at NYU, so how did you eventually decide or get a job with kids?
So I kind of did it backwards. Like, I knew the way that I got involved in play therapy was in high school. I had to read a book called Dibs and Search Yourself, and I was like, I want to do that, but I didn't know what it was. So took along lots of guidance counselor in my undergrad program to decide that my goal was to get the RPT. But in order to get the RPT, you need to be a mental health professional and licensed. So that's how I got the MSW, and I knew that this was my stepping stone to get there. At NYU, we took HB1, which was, the developmental part, which is very important. But then after that, maybe there was one elective working with children. Other than that, I don't know if it's changed. Has it changed? Is there not a whole lot, right? So when I graduated, I didn't have a whole lot, but I knew that I wanted to. So I got training on my own because I needed those 150 hours towards my RPT education component anyway. So there's different places, somewhere in the New York, New Jersey area. Then there was a lot online, and then I flew out towards West every once in a while to get some more training. Now I think you can do the whole thing already, staying in New York, New Jersey. Back, 5 years ago you couldn't. Getting the supervision also I think was very important. My agency provides supervision, but then I got play therapy supervision separate because what I wanted to be a play therapist was I wanted to do it right. I wanted to know, I wanted to get supervision like that, not just the regular supervision. So that's how I did it.
So I actually looked at your email. I looked at everyone's email because I had a question about you mentioned trends that play therapy could, for instance, there's a lot and it's moving more towards East Coast. And then there's play therapy, but there's also creative art therapy. And so one of the articles that you wrote was talking about writing, and I was just wondering if, because the feeling sometimes that some of my fellow students also have this, we wanted to do more like understanding and having a more collaborative, just like future, having different things that we could kind of do at the same time, and so is that something that is possible? Like, is it something that people who are like play therapists or creative art therapists can kind of develop, or is it like a very specific structure? Like, is it a very specific kind of practice that you kind of follow?
No.
Like, is it like a very...
So are you asking if being a play therapist and doing play therapy is kind of a narrow box and then there isn't much to work out of? Is that what you're asking?
Yeah, like having a set curriculum or a set...
No, not at all, not at all. It's very diverse, and what's happening now is they're using it with adults too. They're using it with the elderly, with people who, let's say stroke people who lost the ability to speak. So there's a lot that's being done with the theory of play therapy. Creative art therapy. I was also going to say that there is an international colleagues in play therapy Facebook group. It's a closed group where we go on and you can post a question. Anyone, play therapists all over the world can answer. So you need some, if any of you want or are interested, I'm a member, so I can end you. Creative art therapists are in that group too. Creative art therapy is a cousin of being a play therapist. Lots of play therapists maybe will go on for their credentialing in creative art therapy afterwards, just to add to their repertoire. But and every play therapist is different. Some of them will go more towards the expressive arts, and some of them will go more towards the CBT type. There's so much. Some of them, there's family therapy, there's filial therapy, which is parents and children together. There's theraplay, which is parents and children together. It all depends on what the need is and what you're trained in. So, and what you feel is, as you said, you have to be genuine. And if you feel that path, is right for you, there's a lot out there.
You mentioned for the RPT certification, you need 2,000 clinical hours.
Uh-huh.
Do you know if that's something that you could overlap if you're also doing LCSW?
Yes.
Yes, you can. That's awesome.
Yep.
So we mentioned a few organizations like the Association for Play Therapy. What other organizations, associations would you suggest that students start to kind of research or kind of connect with while they're in school? Amy?
The only other one I was going to mention is actually, it's not an association, it's a Play Therapy Training Institute. I don't know, did you have anything in there? Yeah, and that's where it's great. Yeah. It's ptti.org is the website, and they offer seminars a lot of Sundays actually, which are hard to get to. But that's the one that I would say, PTTI and
A4PT.
oh yeah, the
Association for Play Therapy.
how do you, what's the site?
The number 4,
Yeah.
PT.org.
Right. Yep.
I don't have a training background in play therapy, but I definitely looked at the certificate program here, and I thought it sounded really interesting. This was probably 2 years ago, so I'm pretty sure it's got to be the same or similar to what it was. But there was great classes in attachment theory and family therapy, and what else did they have? Those are the two that.
Child family therapy.
Yeah. So that's a really great program for working with young children.
I was not, I don't know, when I graduated, I became involved with NYU. I did it mostly to get on their website and look for jobs that way. I attended some networking events, that's about it. That's all I was associated with.
I have a question. If any of you have any advice, I know I definitely want to work with children, and I'm leaning more towards but after hearing a lot of what you said, would you have any advice for someone who's just completely confused if, like, graduating, should I just be applying for a social work job? Because that's what I think I want to, or if you have any of the main differences between school social work and play therapy, which I'm also very interested in, as far as like, what I should be leaning more towards.
Well, I mean, I work with middle schoolers, so play therapy with that age group is different than younger kids, but certainly it's very open-ended, and it's very clinical, the work that I do, and I think it's just in working in a school environment, just going in with the awareness that you have to deal with the whole system, and just knowing that, I would think would be helpful. And I almost think of it as like you're working in a family, and you have to, be supportive of the parents as well, or the principals and the teachers, and because getting them to be on your side will help everything run smoother. So I think it's a potentially great great area to work in. I really enjoy it. It's a better schedule. We have all this week off. You get a lot of breaks. That's nice. And it also, if you get into the right school, that's a big thing as well. There's a lot of schools that are highly dysfunctional. I've worked in 2 public schools now, and the one that I'm in now is very supportive of the work I do, and the old one was less so. So I think it depends a lot. And also, I'm different than you had as I'm not a DOE person, so I work at an outside agency that's housed in the school. So it's a very different dynamic than being a DOE person. I'm separate, so they're not meddling in what I do as much, or there's less potential for that. But at the same time, it can be more isolating as well.
So I'm a school social worker now. And as you can see, functioning as a school social worker, you can also get your feet really wet in the play therapy part because we have all that access to the kids. The pluses and the minuses of school social work versus agencies, play therapy, is that what you're asking? Yeah. So in school social work, a big downside is that the client is your client is the school, really, and the kids if you're lucky, not so much the parents, which is a huge problem. At least working as a DOE, a Department of Education person, because kids, as you know, have families, and that family has a big impact. So that's one of the biggest downsides. One of the positives is that you can interact and have a lot of say in what goes on in school, which is where children spend most of their day. So that is a wonderful part. And when the Department of Ed finally starts trusting you, it's a little while, then they live, and you can have a really big impact on 8 a.m. till 3 or 4, whenever the kids go home. That's a big deal to have a successful day at school. They're different children, they're different, they feel more confident, they're empowered, so that's a big piece. I know lots of people who work in schools during the day and then they see kids in the evenings for a little bit, if you're worried. It also probably depends on the district. My district lets me do play therapy with my, the kids that I have. I probably spend 75% of my time doing direct intervention with my kids in groups. 25% of my time is spent talking to teachers, fighting with the Department of Ed. No, I'm gonna be honest, fighting for services. The nice part is if I get my way, then I don't have to worry that I'm gonna, I don't have 10 sessions and then you need to reapply. You get the school year. And so that's you get a stretch of time to work with the child until the end of the year. So I know people do both. I enjoy my work in the school because I get to see the kids in their, I can watch them with other peers. I'm not relying on what did the mothers say the teacher said she thought she saw during recess. So I find that you get to see them really in action. You get to impact a huge part of their day, but you don't have the parents' part. So I think that's.
One question about children's hospitals, and social workers who work in them, are they like focusing on paperwork and also do projects, or there's people that can really just do ours?
Sure.
Yeah, so I volunteered as a child life therapist before. Child life therapists are the people in the hospitals who are doing they're not trained, well, they're not social workers, they're not psychologists. They're trained specifically in child life, which is taking care of the emotional aspect of being in a hospital for a child. Hospital social workers do not do that. They do the paperwork, discharge planning, and all of that. So if you're doing hospital social work, even if it's I was in New York Presbyterian Children's Hospital, you're not going to be doing actual work. You're going to be doing very little actual work with the kids. You're more going to be doing with the family, supporting the family in general, not so much to play actually with the children themselves.
So my work, the cool thing about my job is like I get to go into schools, so I get to like see kids in their school environment. I get to like speak with teachers and coordinate services around that, and then I also get to go into hospitals. I had a kid who he's under a serious emotional disturbance waiver, and he was admitted to Kings County Hospital. I had another one that was admitted to Bellevue. We have to do like 10-day meetings in the hospital, 20-day meetings if they're still there. We have to talk about discharge planning and all of those things. I think that it's usually a psychiatrist who does like most of the clinical work with the children. They evaluate them, they make sure that they're on the right kind of medication, see if they aren't on medication that they should be on. And then it's the social worker who does a lot of like the hard labor of like getting consents from parents, like medical consents from like the medical consenters, which are usually birth parents, or planning what their treatment is going to be once they're discharged, so that they're not back in another week. They're trying to get rid of the beds and things. So
Are you talking about psychiatric hospitals or regular like?
Well, Kings County and Bellevue, I mean, both of my experiences are like the children's ward. I mean, they're not just for.
Not just for
They can be regular hospitals too. Like I have one kid, he likes it when I go with him to his appointments to see his psychiatrist, which, just to get his Ritalin medication, We talk about whether it should be upped or not, but it's not a social worker that works with him at that hospital, it's his psychiatrist.
So I do want to, we're winding down, I do want to thank all the panelists for sharing their experiences and perspectives. I would like to ask each of them really quickly one takeaway for our students who really are interested in working with children and young populations. What one piece would you have us take away? Amy?
Okay, one piece. Whoa. There was a question actually before that I would go back to, which is just about just getting any kind of experience that you can. I guess it was your question about working in it, should you apply to schools or should you apply to do play therapy? And the truth is that right now, you just want to get a job and you want to get your hands on working clinically with kids. And once you have that, you will be able to take that and put that into any arena that you want. So I guess that would be my takeaway. Don't look for, I want to be a school social worker, I want to be a hospital social worker, I want to work in a sensory gym. Right now, you just want to work with children. So wherever that job may be, and you need the clinical supervision, so I would do that as a takeaway also, to have your job be working with children and also to have the supervision hours so that you work towards your LCSW.
Well, I mean, that's a great one. Don't pigeonhole yourself. Don't think that I just have to do this. There's a lot of other things you can do to get there when you think of short-term and long-term goals. Your short-term ones might switch up, your long-term one might stay the same, or knowing what you want short-term might lead you somewhere totally different than you expected long-term. My takeaway in terms of working with children is make sure you have a tremendous amount of patience and a lot of energy, because they do too. I don't know, that's all.
I think you need to really love children. They'll know if you don't. They'll know it even if you try to fake it. You need to have patience. You need to enjoy children. And if you do, I think like everybody else that don't, any experience, you'll be able to take it and make it into what you need it to be. And so that's the first one. And in terms of, if you are interested in becoming an RPT, I think get yourself as much education as you can, training as you can. And you don't have to do it, some people like to do it all in 1 year. I found that, I do a little bit at a time, so I can really get myself using that stuff as I'm learning it. And then I see, as I have a need, and I have some kids who this stuff is not working for, okay, well, what else is there? And go on. And so I think the training is important, and you really need to love kids if you want to do this stuff.
James?
I would say, second what some of the other panelists have said, not pigeonholing yourself and just going in with the idea that I'm going to get a job, try and make it something where you can clock your hours towards the LCSW, and with the idea that most people go through a couple of jobs before they land on one, and if that happens, that's okay. And also, once you do land on a job, I guess, that you may have to be proactive as far as getting the support you need. And whether that's, play therapy or CBT or whatever it is, there's plenty of resources out there. And whatever speaks to you, you can find something that's, that speaks to you, that inspires you, that will help you feel supported. So that's what I would say.
Thank you.
Thank you guys. Good.